says in this prayer for us that when we believe, we are empowered. He literally says we are empowered with power. Paul was on his knees praying that the Ephesian Christians who are believers, and yes, you and me, that we will be empowered with the power that comes from God according to His riches of His glory. Let that roll around in your mind for a moment. You and I, as believers in God, tap into the riches of His glory. He makes that available to you and me. We have power when we believe in Him. It is part of His promise to us. He will give us power. And Paul says that the power comes from living in God's love. That's the key to the power. Living in God's love. We like power in our culture, don't we? As a matter of fact, we're enthralled with power brokers. People who have the power. One of the lines I like best about power was said by a fellow on his deathbed. His name is Edward Bennett William. He was being teased by those around him about his power and influence as a politician in Washington. And here's what he said. He said, "Power? I'm about to meet real power." He was right. He was going to meet his Maker. And God is the one with real power. And Paul says here that we have access to that power. According to the riches of God's glory, it's available to you and me. But the key is the love of God. That's the key to gaining His power. The love of God. Paul says in verse 19, may you experience the love of Christ. Though it is so great, you won't fully understand it. Then you will be filled with the fullness of life and power that comes from God. By experiencing God's love, being loved by Him and loving Him above all else, we tap in to that great source of power. Now, what kind of power is Paul addressing? About what kind of power are we talking this morning? We're talking about the most important kind of power. We're talking about power over sin, power over weakness, power over fear, power over shame, power over guilt, power over despair, power over loneliness, power over rage, power over lust, power over greed, power over pride, power over doubt, power over all these things that beat us down. Paul says we have power over all that stuff through the love of God. If we love God above all else, and if we enjoy knowing that He loves us, then we receive His power. Now, unfortunately, in our culture, we're told a lot of lies about the key to life and power and happiness. And of course, we chase happiness in lots of different ways, don't we? I just read this week that according to Psychology Today, last year there were 4,000 books published on happiness. Last year, 4,000 books published on how to get happiness, on what happiness is. Think about that. In the year 2000, there were 50 books published on happiness. You think our culture is consumed with happiness? But you know, happiness is like that little puppy that you want to pet. And the more you chase it, what does it do? Runs. If you want to pet it, ignore it. And it'll come up to you and you can pet it. But even just for a moment, and it's gone. That's happiness. Forget happiness. What God offers you and me is His love, which Paul says gives us a depth and a meaning and a significance and an affirmation and a purpose in life that nothing else will afford us. And it's because, as he says in this prayer, through what we believe, Christ enters our life, and he is the essence of God's love, and he lives in us, and he makes it our life have depth and meaning and purpose. You know, in our culture, there's a danger because we're so independent. I could get you to say we believe this morning, but really most of us think I believe, not we. I. And see, in our culture, that's part of the problem. We have so drilled into people's heads to be independent and look out for number one, that we become independent to a fault. And what we end up saying is, Jesus and I can do anything. Instead of, Jesus and we can do anything. I got to thinking about that last night. We're honoring John Brandenburg, and you're going to meet him at the end of the service if you don't know him. I thought to myself, I wonder, you know, you look at John in a wheelchair almost all his life. I don't know, how old was John? 60-something. 60 what? 62. I think about the 20, how many years, Rob and I have been here? 20, almost 30 years here at Southwest. We see that long. Wilson, I haven't been preaching that long. Rob and I have been members here, but John's been here. And I think about, if anybody could have stayed home and not come to church, been John Brandenburg. But I think in that 30-year period, and of course, like Craig said, he's been here over 50. Think about what his presence and worship, Sunday after Sunday, has meant. As people have watched him sing as only John can sing, and smile, and the joy that he just exudes because, yes, indeed, he believes. But he believes, and he knows that we believe. And to watch somebody help him take the bread and the cup and come around the table of our Lord with John Brandenburg. See, I'm so thankful he didn't say Jesus and I and stay home and say, well, I can be a Christian without his community, because this community would have been less than what it is without him. We believe. Together, we believe. And when we do, there's a power that is beyond comprehension. We believe. And the fact that we believe, God has done things in us that we never dreamed. 10 years ago, some interesting mission things began in this church. And with this church, not just in this church. 10 years ago, Dr. Steve Hooks had a vision to take seminary to the nations, to take seminary education to preachers around the country. And this year, in the 10th year of Seminary of the Nations, preachers in over 40 countries, 3,000 of them, will be taught. And they would not have had a chance to be taught were it not for Seminary of the Nations. This church, because we believe, have been able to be a part of that from its beginning. 10 years ago, Rick Harper and Naoma Coons, Rick from Georgia Tech CCF and Naoma from CMF, had a dream of planting international campus ministries around the world. This church was on the ground floor and participating in that. And now there are campus ministries: Santiago, Chile; Bangkok, Thailand; Tübingen, Germany; Salamanca, Spain; Birmingham, England; Puebla, Mexico. And we've been right there in the heart of it because we believe.